All right, I'd like to call this meeting to order at 6:01 p.m. on January 5th, 2021. Can we get a roll call, please, Mr. Hawley?
Mr. Doherty,
Present. Present.
Dr. Lorenz,
Here.
Ms. Pettit,
Here.
Dr. Swetchenow,
Here.
Mrs. Washburn.
Here. And I need a motion to adopt the agenda.
So moved.
Do I have any seconds?
Michelle seconded.
Thank you, Ms. Pettit. All right. Can we get a roll call on that, please, Mr. Hawley?
Dr. Lorenz,
Yes.
Ms. Pettit,
Yes.
Dr. Swetchenow,
Yes.
Mrs. Washburn,
Yes.
Mr. Doherty.
Yes.
All right.
Eileen, excuse me for 1 minute. Mr. Lape, can I check? I don't hear Mr. Doherty or Ms. Pettit. Are they, should they be coming across a loudspeaker? Should I have earphones on to hear them? Okay. We're not hearing them in this room, correct? Okay. I just wanted to be sure that we were hearing everything, as long as they're being recorded, as long as we're hearing what we're supposed to hear. Thank you.
All right. So welcome, everybody. Thank you for tuning in tonight. And one of the purposes of this meeting, it's our organizational meeting. And do we get to, oh, yes. We will now stand and recite the Pledge of Allegiance. So please join us. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with justice for all. Thank you. I hope everybody had a nice holiday, and we hope for better things in 2021, right?
Eileen, are you muted? Or
Sorry about that. I need a motion to approve the tax budget for calendar year 2021.
So moved.
I'll second.
All right, thank you. Can we get a roll call, please?
Yeah, we need to do that.
Oh, sorry. I thought we were just voting to approve it.
We need to hear the vote.
I know, fly through everything. I thought we were approving to discuss it. Sorry.
Evan's not going to get off that easily.
All right, thank you. So one of the pieces for this evening is our annual tax budget. If you do look in board docs, the tax budget is in there. And I've also added in just a brief explanation as to what the tax budget is. So if you want a little bit more detail, that's where it is. I will quickly go over what the tax budget is. One of the most important documents that we look at regularly within the school district is our 5-year forecast. This is a little bit different than our 5-year forecast. It does utilize some of the same pieces as our 5-year forecast, but we still primarily go back to our 5-year forecast on a regular basis. What the tax budget is, it is an auditor required form, in this particular case through the Hamilton County Auditor. And the form that we do utilize is what is required specifically by the Hamilton County Auditor's Office. So this is not something that we have created. This is something that we worked within the construct of what they have asked us to do. The tax budget in particular looks at 3 different funds within the school district. There's many different funds within the district, but not all of them are supported by tax revenue. So just as the tax budget sounds, it has to do with property taxes. So the 3 funds that we're looking at are our general fund, which is our main operating account. That's a 00 fund account, 001 account. Then we're looking at our bond retirement account. That's pretty self-explanatory as to what it does. It pays off any debt that we have within the district. There are currently bonds being paid off that will be paid off at the end of calendar year 2024. And that is the only debt that the district currently has. And then lastly is our permanent improvement fund. Our permanent improvement fund mainly helps with capital projects and supporting capital projects within the district. So I wouldn't consider it a part of our pure operations, but it does support many of the things that the school district does on a regular basis. What you'll see is a little bit different than how we look at it. And this is why it's a little bit different when you're talking about an auditor's form versus what the school district uses. So we work on fiscal years, July through June. The auditor's office works on calendar years. So when you do look at it, there are 4 separate 6-month periods starting actually January 1st of this year, 2021, and then it ends 12/31/2022. This has been updated for up-to-date information on property values. So if you're not aware with how your own personal property values are assessed and valued on a regular basis, every county reassesses your property values every 3 years. They do it in 2 different types. It's called a triennial update, where they actually do a full reassessment. And this year, for Claremont and Hamilton counties, which are our primary property tax areas, they're on the same schedule, but different schedules. So one was a triennial, one was a reassessment year. And so if you do live in those counties, what we saw primarily was about 8.5% increase in property values. What's important for most of the people that would be listening are residential values. There's class 1, there's class 2 values when you look at what the auditor looks at on a regular basis. And class 1 is agricultural and residential values. There is a little bit of agricultural value in Loveland City School District, but not very much. As you can imagine, most of it's residential in class 1. If you lived in Hamilton County, the total property value increase was just below 11.4%. And in Claremont, it was just over 4.6%. So you can see a dramatic difference between each of the counties. To get to the 8.5%, really, it was Hamilton kind of pulling us up. Claremont, overall, with all the property value increases, was just over 4.6%, and Hamilton County was 12.7%. We are also in Warren County, but it's a very small portion, and they're on a different schedule. Their next assessment is actually this current calendar year, but it won't have a dramatic effect on property values. What's really important about property values, just to understand, is when your home is reassessed and total property values are increased within the school district, that does not necessarily fully impact the revenue of the school district. As we've talked about very often, and school districts will talk about, is as your property values increase, the voted millage within the district actually does decrease. It's kind of a seesaw effect. So as home values increase, the other side actually goes down. And so we do see a little bit of an increase. There's something called inside millage within the school district. It's just about 4 mills. But the primary portion of what the school district does receive from property taxes is based on voted millage or outside millage. And that does actually scale back with the increases in property tax or property values. So when you're looking at the tax budget, you will see the values, the amount of revenue that we anticipate, Again, this is going to be, especially on the, when you're looking at the five-year forecast, that is our general fund. So when you're looking at the five-year forecast and looking at the general fund within the tax budget, there's going to be a slight difference within fiscal 22, which is next year, just because these are updated numbers. What we had previously were, we were predicting what home values were going to be and those kind of details. So this is something that we certify this evening. We send to the auditor's office in order to continue to receive property tax revenue. Are there any questions on that?
Kevin,
Everyone might be asking.
am I on? Yeah. Can you hear me okay, Kevin?
Hey, John,
Can you hear me now? Okay, just for clarification and for purposes of informing the community, I'm not sure where we're at right now because I know you were doing some adjusting on the schedules that I had looked at earlier, but there's a bit of an increase on the general fund's revenue between calendar 21 and calendar 22. Can you just comment on that briefly? And then maybe you can also advise us and the community what to expect with regards to bond retirement and its impact on taxes that the community is paying.
Yep, those are great questions. So what you'll see in calendar year, so that's the second 6-month column and the fourth 6-month column, you'll see a slight increase. Well, actually, you'll see it on both of those. The reason why you see a slight increase is due to the previous mention of our inside millage. So as property values increase in the district-wide, we do receive a slight bit of revenue increase. And that is what's on our inside millage. We could talk about inside millage far more detail. It's something I believe even from the original creation of the state of Ohio, but it does not roll back. So the proper term is the rollback of millage. The inside mills, which is roughly 4 mills, does not roll back. So as property values increase, we do see a slight increase. But the voted millage does roll back. And so with the numbers that I said, about 8.5% increase in property tax or in property values, you're not seeing the same increase in revenue if you just do the simple math on it. So that kind of isn't very indicative of the fact that we do not receive the same amount as when home values increase. The other portion was about the bond retirement fund. So currently the bond retirement is being funded by a 1.2 mil levy. That's not what it was originally. It has actually been scaled back in there. That is a part of my explanation on the website that you'll see that the auditor has a right to scale back on the bond retirement millage. But at this point in time, it is actually going to be 1.15 mils. I just received that from the Hamilton County Auditor's Office. So what you're seeing over time, when I first came into the district, it was 1.6 mils. I know these are small incremental changes, but those are tax savings to the district. So when I first came into the district, it was 1.6 mils. We petitioned the auditor's office to see if they could actually decrease that because we saw what the balance was accumulating more than we felt was necessary. They did agree to that. So it went down to 1.2 mils, and now they have on their own adjusted it down to 1.15 mils. So as we get closer to the end of 2024, I fully expect it to probably be a little bit lower as well, as home values continue to typically increase in value. But again, at the end of 2024, that will roll off. So that bond millage will go away. Does that answer your question?
It does, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Okay, if there aren't any other questions, can we have a roll call to vote on that, please?
Yes.
Sorry. Ms. Pettit,
Yes.
Dr. Swetchenow,
Yes.
Mrs. Washburn,
Yes.
Mr. Doherty,
Yes.
Dr. Lorenz.
Yes.
All right, moving on now to the organizational part of the meeting. I need a motion, woo, coming in with a boom. A motion to elect president of the Loveland Board of Education for 2021. So do we have any nominations for that position?
I would like to nominate Kathy Lawrence to continue in her excellent role, notwithstanding Eileen's wonderful work tonight of being the board president for the upcoming year.
Okay, we have a nomination for Dr. Lorenz. Would anybody like to second that? Ms. Pettit, I see your hand. Dr. Lorenz, do you accept that nomination?
Thank you, Dr. Swetchenow. I do appreciate your nomination. I don't know if there are any other nominations this evening. I would be willing to serve. I do feel that as we're probably coming into a time when we have an interim superintendent, it's probably not a bad idea to have someone interfacing with an interim superintendent who's been doing it for a little while. So I would be glad to handle that job if my fellow board members would like me to. I will say before, if nominations get closed and we do this, before we get to the vice president, I don't know whether the board would want to consider that the person who is nominated and serves as vice president would be the person who would serve as the point person, the person who schedules interviews and works with perhaps a search committee for our next full-time superintendent. I don't know if that would be something that the vice president would like to do, but that probably would be helpful. Again, as we're coming into a time when we would need somebody who's working with an interim superintendent, it might be good to have someone else as a point person there. So those are my thoughts, but I would accept the nomination. I know that was a long acceptance speech.
And I think that sounds like a great idea because there is a lot of behind the scenes work that the president does that the rest of us don't necessarily do as far as extra meetings and emails and things of that nature. So with COVID and an interim superintendent and the superintendent search, I think that sounds great.
Yeah, I'd like to.
All right.
I see Kevin has raised his hand.
Can you all hear me? Can you all hear me? Now you can? Yeah, I'd like to maybe just add a couple of comments to this. And I always think about these meetings as not only the opportunity, maybe the only opportunity for all five of us to talk with each other, but also an opportunity to talk to the public. And we don't get we never really have enough opportunities to have a conversation about that. And I think certainly, we've had a year or so of difficulty, controversy, et cetera, within the district. I think Kathy, Eileen, and Michelle are obviously part of the full previous board, and we're in the middle of the issues that the community has been wrestling with all this time. And there might be concerns out there about Kathy from that respect. And I think there's a few things that ought to be said. One, if it's not clear to everybody in the public, the role of the president from an exertion of power, influence, direction, et cetera, is no more significant than the power of any other single board member. We really are peers in that respect, and the role really bestows upon the president some administrative responsibilities, which are not always, a lot of fun, and they certainly are not without additional time commitments. So having somebody who is and I think most importantly, armed with deep historical organizational knowledge, especially at a time when we're going to have an interim superintendent, and it might be worthwhile talking a little bit about what that means, but for simplicity's sake, it's somebody that's going to watch over some of the administrative activities of the district while we're in the process of recruiting and ultimately hiring a new permanent superintendent. So somebody's going to come in here relatively new, presumably with experience in this kind of a role, but new to the district, and faced with a whole lot of issues on a day-to-day basis, where organizational knowledge and expertise certainly will be very valuable. It'll be a lot of coordination that has to occur, and I think Kathy, amongst all of us, is clearly best armed from that perspective. Additionally, this may or may not be visible to the community, but Kathy has respected our independence, has, I think, worked well with us individually. We don't always agree. We really don't, contrary maybe to popular opinion. We don't always agree on everything, but we have found a way collectively to have those disagreements aired out, and we all try to find a way to move forward. And Kathy has actually helped facilitate a tremendous amount of that. And I just need to say that I respect her in this regard. I think she's done a fine job as a president. She deserves to have it again, as long as she's willing to do it. So I'm going to speak in favor of her nomination as well.
All right, so we need to close the nomination then if we don't have anybody else to not be nominated. So I need a motion, right, to close the nomination.
So moved.
And I'll second that. All right, can we have a roll call, please? A roll call vote to close the nominations, please.
Dr. Swetchenow,
Yes.
Mrs. Washburn,
Yes.
Mr. Doherty,
Yes.
Dr. Lorenz,
Yes.
Ms. Pettit,
Yes.
Then unfortunately, you need another vote to vote on the nomination. It just,
You don't take
Wake up.
over now?
pardon? No, you need a motion to approve.
Oh. All right, so now we need a motion to approve the nomination of Dr. Lorenz for the position of president of the board for 2021.
I move.
All right, Ms. Pettit,
I'll second Michelle.
thank you. Any discussion?
I have also a little bit of discussion to add into what Kevin had said, and obviously I wouldn't have nominated you if I did not respect the job that you've done during an incredibly hard time. You've spent a lot of time and effort behind the scenes keeping things running. You have an incredible depth of experience, which you've been more than gracious to share with the new board members, which I really appreciate. And you have the ability, far more than any of the rest of us, to help to continue to guide our school district in the hands of an interim superintendent, whereas I know that I would be completely lost in that. So I appreciate your ability to accept that nomination and to do this job, especially in light of the fact that I think that you've been unfairly castigated as a lightning rod to some degree in the decisions that the entire board has made. This has never been a decision made by the board president or the board chairperson, but a decision of the entire board. And I think that we've worked together very well collaboratively as a board, even when we've disagreed, in order to try to move the school district forward. So I gladly would vote for you to be the president.
All right, with that being said, can we have a roll call, please?
Mrs. Washburn,
Yes.
Mr. Doherty,
Yes.
Dr. Lorenz,
Yes.
Ms. Pettit,
Yes.
Dr. Swetchenow,
Yes, again.
Yes, I think it's my turn. Thank you very much. Thank you all very much. I really appreciate the kind
clarification.
words. I have very much enjoyed serving on this Board of Education. I've very much enjoyed working with the people I've worked with, and so thank you for this trust. Thank you for this work that you've given me, but I do appreciate it. Thank you very much for your kind words. Now we'll move on to the election of the Vice President. And so we would need, I will open the floor to nominations for the Vice President of the Board for 2021. Are there any nominations?
I would like to nominate Mr. Doherty.
Okay, Ms. Washburn nominated Mr. Doherty. Mr. Doherty, would you accept this nomination?
I would, Kathy. I guess we'll have a chance to talk more about it in a moment.
Okay. Are there any other nominations? I'm looking around, there are only, by the way, we never announced, I don't think, there are three of us, three board members here in the cafeteria, and then we have Ms. Pettit and Mr. Doherty remotely with us, and then we have some administrators here in the room with us. So I'm kind of looking around to see if there are more nominations, but there are only two people here, so, pardon? I don't think we need a second for a nomination or a second to close. If you want to second, you certainly, we can put your name down as having seconded.
You
Thank
know
you.
better than I do.
Thank you. I don't see any other nominations. Can we have a motion to close the nominations? Mrs. Washburn moved to close the nominations. Now, Mr. Doherty, would you like to say whether you would accept this nomination?
Yeah, I will. Okay, so I take this very seriously. I came on the board, whatever, it was 7 months ago, purely and absolutely in the interest of trying to help the community move forward. I hope I've done a little bit in that respect. I guess when we talk about this role, perhaps being in an organizing position, maybe a little bit of a guiding position with respect to the permanent superintendent's job. I think that that's an incredibly important thing. I think that we're still
Mr. Doherty, you have frozen here on our end.
most positive way possible, but also with the most opportunity for success and growth and of trust within the community. So I think that more than any other reason is why I think I might be helpful in this role. So it's not going to stop me from having an opinion on lots of other things, as we know. That's, difference of opinions are a formula for success, I think, within the board. If all of you think I'm the right person to do this and you want to vote for me, that'd be great. I'll commit myself to doing it well, and hopefully having a hand in the selection of the superintendent, which I hope we all understand is far more than filling a job vacancy. It's rebuilding trust with the community. It's setting direction for the district. It's a whole bunch of things that go into the selection of that person. And we're going to have to reach out to the community and do a lot of listening as we're trying to execute this upcoming search.
Thank you. May I just say, Mr. Doherty, I don't know if you heard me or not. At one point, your video was frozen here for us. I don't know if it was frozen for the recording of the meeting. So perhaps we can check that when we check the recording. And if you would like to write something as a little bit of a statement that we can put in the minutes, if there are any pieces missing in the recording, we could get those into the minutes. It may be that the recording got it all, but we had a couple minutes frozen here, or at least my screen did. So
I'd say about 30 seconds.
Okay, sorry about that. If somebody can tell me for sure that the public version lost that, I will write something up, and
Okay,
I think all of you know me well enough to know what I was probably saying while it was.
okay. Thank you very much. We'll read your lips and see. Well, no, we won't because you were frozen. So that's okay. The nominations have been closed for vice president. Can we now have a roll call to vote for, oh, wait a minute. We have to vote to close the nominations. See, it's,
Mr. Doherty,
Yes.
Dr. Lorenz,
yes.
Ms. Pettit,
Yes.
Dr. Swetchenow,
Yes.
Mrs. Washburn.
Yes.
Motion carried. Nominations are closed. I would move, and we would need a second to appoint Kevin Doherty as Vice President of the Board of Education.
I second.
Mrs. Washburn seconded. And I believe we can go ahead and vote on that. I think we've had, unless anyone has anything they would like to say at this point before we vote on that.
I think I can only concur with what Kevin said, and I'm sure I know fairly well based on our history together that you've thought very deeply about taking on the added role. I much respect the fact that you're willing to help to be kind of, for lack of a better word, a new voice on the board and helping to pick a new superintendent, which I think is a very important and heavy job that all of us have taken on. So thanks for offering to do that.
You bet.
All right. Seeing no other hands waving, Mr. Hawley, can we vote on that?
Dr. Lorenz,
Yes.
Ms. Pettit,
Yes.
Dr. Swetchenow,
Yes.
Mrs. Washburn,
Yes.
Mr. Doherty.
Motion carried. Congratulations, Mr. Doherty.
Thank you, everybody. Appreciate it.
We'll find lots of work for you to do, I'm sure. The next item on our organizational items, and I will just let everyone know who's listening, this meeting that we're having this evening was advertised as a special meeting because we had not, it is at this meeting that we adopt our meeting schedule for the 2021 calendar year. And so there are no meetings yet noted on the website. They will be once we adopt them. But that's why this is called a special meeting. It is for the purpose of organizing the board for the year 2021. So it includes organizational items, annual items, and it generally includes our budget hearing, which we have just concluded. So the first item would be a motion, and I will move to establish the time, place, and dates of the Loveland City School Boards of Education business meetings for the calendar year. Is there a second?
I second.
Mrs. Washburn seconded. I think Ms. Pettit raised her hand too. I'll have to watch more closely to get that. These meetings are listed under this item. These are what we call our regular business meetings. Unless it's a special meeting or an emergency meeting, all board meetings are regular meetings. So we have regular meetings for the purpose of business meetings. And then you'll see in the next item that we have regular meetings for the purpose of work session. So these first ones are our regular business meetings. They are generally the third Tuesday of each month. You will see that there are a couple on the fifth Tuesdays. Those have something to do with budget necessities, or one of them has to do with the beginning of the school year. So those are the dates that will go onto the website for the business meetings for 2021. Any questions or discussion or issues? I think board members have had a chance to look at these meetings to make sure we've done a little maneuvering with them. Any questions or discussion? I don't see anything. I think Dr. Swetchenow is now entering them into his count. No, I'm just so, Mr. Hawley, can we vote on this?
Ms. Pettit,
Yes.
Dr. Swetchenow,
Yes.
Mrs. Washburn,
Yes.
Mr. Doherty,
Yes.
Dr. Lorenz,
Yes. Motion carried. The next item on the agenda, I will need a motion to establish the time, place, and dates of the Loveland City Schools Board of Education work sessions for the calendar year, and those dates are also listed. And they are generally the first Tuesday of the month with a couple of exceptions. Is there a motion?
I move.
I see Mrs. Washburn moved. Ms. Pettit, you want to wave your hand at me and then I'll, Ms. Pettit seconded that motion. You'll see that there are a few changes on this list. One has been moved, two have been moved to Thursdays. The one in November, of course, was moved to Thursday because of Election Day. And we do have one meeting that we moved to a second Tuesday just to fit everything into the schedule. But in general, they follow the first Tuesdays. I believe I heard maybe just today from Dr. Swetchenow that April 6th might be an issue. I should make a statement that I believe that the legislature has allowed virtual and in-person meetings through July. Am I correct on that? I believe their change in the statute allowed it through July, but I think it's at least through July. So if you can be with us as a Zoom, we can have virtual participation. Then prior to the virus, we were not able to have people participate. You could listen to a meeting either by conference call or by Zoom, but you could not participate. But I believe that we can advertise all our meetings at least through June as both virtual and in person. So if that's all right. I don't know if there's any other discussion about work sessions. I also would just warn you that I've been through hiring a superintendent before, and these meetings are not going to be sufficient for that. There will be other meetings added on for work with a search committee if the board decides that, and also looking for a superintendent. So we will be adding some meetings at some point. At some point, yes. Any questions or discussion? Seeing none, Mr. Hawley, can we vote on that?
Dr. Swetchenow,
Yes.
Mrs. Washburn,
Yes.
Mr. Doherty,
Yes.
Dr. Lorenz,
Yes.
Ms. Pettit,
Yes.
Motion carried. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Muted. Sorry about that. Let me do that again. I was muted for that. The next item is a resolution requesting the county auditor to make advance payment of taxes pursuant to ORC 321.34. This is after approving the tax budget, then we need to request that the county auditor pay us what taxes we are owed. So I believe I heard Mrs. Washburn move that. Is there a second?
Second.
I think Mr. Doherty seconded that. And you can read the whereases there. This, again, is a regular annual motion, and the section 2 says the treasurer shall forward to the county auditor a certified copy of this resolution. We have to make sure that the county auditor sends us the money.
Mhm.
Any questions or discussion? Seeing none, Mr. Hawley, can we vote on that?
Mrs. Washburn,
Yes.
Mr. Doherty,
Yes.
Dr. Lorenz,
Yes.
Ms. Pettit,
Yes.
Dr. Swetchenow.
Yes.
Motion carried. I'm juggling a little bit, muting and unmuting so that we don't get feedback with those people, with those external voices coming in, but that motion did carry. The next set of resolutions are all of the annual resolutions that are pursuant to the board organizational meeting. So I would move to approve the following resolutions. They're all listed there. I'm not going to read them all. We can talk about those. once we have a motion, because we do need to add a couple of things to it. But is there a second to these annual resolutions? I see Ms. Pettit, she jumped in before you did, Mrs. Washburn, if that's okay. Many of these, if you don't remember them from last January, many of these are just annual memberships that we join. They are appointing the business manager as a purchasing agent. It has to do with setting surety bonds. We do authorize our treasurer to attend public records training as designee to the board. This is what most boards do. There is nothing that says that board members cannot also attend these trainings. So it would be simply a matter of letting Mr. Hawley know if a board member wanted to attend a training, but we do appoint Mr. Hawley as our designee. This is where we approve the firms that provide legal services to us. This is where we do some of these items that allow work to be carried on between meetings if there's something that needs to be done prior to a resolution at a meeting. The final ones on the list are a few annual policies. Basically, those need to be reviewed each year, and the policy committee reviews those and then presents them to the board. We also review all of our policies that include names of officers so that we have the correct names in those policies. We do need to approve, hopefully there will be an OSBA meeting in November of 2021. We do need to add a name as a delegate and as an alternate. This is a little bit difficult at this point. I think there's something that happens probably between now and the OSBA in November. So I'm thinking we're not absolutely positive who's going to propose themselves for election in November. But is there anybody who wants to, at least at this point, be appointed delegate and alternate delegate to OSBA? Don't everybody raise your hand at once.
I love meetings.
I hear Dr. Schwetz now saying that he loves meetings, and so I think we'll put him down as delegate. How do you feel about that?
That would be great.
I see heads nodding. How about an alternate?
I would like to nominate
Oh,
Ms.
there we
Pettit.
go. I'll alternate.
I muted myself after I said it. Can you repeat what you said, Ms. Pettit? Did you agree to be alternate?
I did.
All
Then
right.
I withdraw as delegate.
Now, this is not fooling around, guys. This is serious business.
You just-
All right.
Eric, you just have to be sick. Don't worry. That's what you do.
Okay, I think that handles all of those annual things that I've listed. Anybody have any questions about any of them? Mr. Doherty?
Yeah, I have a few, and I don't, let me just, most of these are pretty straightforward, I think, but there's a few that I'm not personally familiar with, and I'm sure the community may also not be familiar with. One would be a board service fund. The other one would be authorizing the treasurer to establish new fund accounts. I think I know what that's about, but I think it's worth some education. I think I have one other, might be a little difficult and controversial to get into, but before I get into it, it might be worthwhile just to affirm that there's no change in any of these, including the policies at the end from prior versions or past practices. I know that
if we want to go backwards, there is no change. Those policies are just required to be reviewed. So there are no changes, but there is a review of those policies as required by law. So no changes from previous.
And then maybe the board service fund and the establishment of new fund accounts, somebody can comment on? maybe Kevin or,
I swear I unmuted it. The Board Service Fund is the fund through which board members, I believe, can be reimbursed for mileage if they attend a conference, something like that. It can be used for that. The amount is set by law, but maybe the treasurer can give a little more information on that, and then he can speak to the funds that he can establish, the new fund accounts.
Yeah, I mean, there's not a whole lot more about the board service fund. It is authorized by that Ohio Revised Code, section 331315, which is listed in there. It's basically exactly what Dr. Lorenz said. Its purpose is for professional development, reimbursing for mileage, things like that. That has to do with the purposes of fulfilling your role as a board member. Some of these are kind of like what's been talked about. They're things that just occur every year. So for myself as a treasurer, there's two parts to that, new fund account. So I mean, typically, if we do actually have a new fund within the accounting system, we still do bring it to the board for approval. But this is also for the purposes of handling with financial institutions and setting up new accounts with them. Again, we typically still bring those to the board. This is just giving me authorization when applicable to be able to do that. So we typically bring contracts like that, and we also do approve new funds as one-offs.
okay. The last comment I have is, and I apologize to all of you for raising this one, but it's the first one. And just expressing a concern that because we're voting on something that affects us, that perhaps it'd be worthwhile, if possible, legally, for us to step back from making a decision on that until we've maybe had a chance to talk and think about it a little bit. I may be totally alone in this one, but just a concern. It's maybe the word maximum that triggers the concern.
So I'm not quite clear. Were you asking, Mr. Doherty, if the board needs to vote on this?
Well, if I understand what's happening, Kathy, we are voting on setting board member compensation to the maximum allowable by law. And what I'm asking is, do we have the ability to not make that decision tonight?
I don't know the answer to that question. It is not the Board of Education's choice to choose the maximum amount. That is set by the legislature. That is set by the Ohio State Legislature.
Right.
It would be my understanding, if we do not approve it tonight, then we are not setting a compensation level.
Yeah, so, and a couple of things, and maybe speaking out of turn, it might be something that you have to table for another time, because this is a meeting, so there will have to be compensation for it. My other understanding with it as well, and Dr. Lorenz, you've probably been through this far more than I have, is as a board member, you can't vote on your own compensation. So for instance, for those of the people who are watching that don't necessarily know what it is, it's $125 per meeting. And so it's a maximum of 40 meetings. So the maximum that a board member could ever get paid for doing your role is $5,000. And if you were being paid $100 per meeting and the board decided to increase that amount, it would not take effect until new people either came on the board or they were voted in to the board. So from my understanding, we'd have to check with legal on it, that your compensation basically has already been set. What you'd be voting on is compensation for future board members. I don't know if it works the opposite way, if you actually decrease the amount. I don't know that.
Okay,
Does
so
that make sense?
with that understanding, I'll withdraw for tonight. I guess what would have been a tabling request for that item. And I may, try to talk to some of us individually on this subject, and maybe raise it for discussion at a future meeting.
Because what I can say is that it is something that you can vote on a future, so it doesn't always have to be done at the organizational meeting. So it is something that can be voted on at another meeting. So for instance, if it was the end of January, beginning of February, I would like to just get a little bit clarification for the board as well as to when that takes into effect. So what has occurred at times is individuals have donated their salary to the school district. So that is a different option, just something to be aware of.
Right, I'm aware of that, and I have no idea, and not going to for a moment speak for anybody else on the board on something like this. There's just some uneasiness that I have about this particular one, and I need to think on it myself some more.
Okay, thanks, Mr. Doherty. Any other comments or questions? I would just like to clarify, since I mentioned with the board service account that it might provide mileage compensation for board members. That is only for something like professional development or a conference out of town or something. Board members are not compensated for any mileage as far as meetings are concerned, any events that happened at school buildings that they attend. This would only be on the occasion of leaving the district, going to some kind of professional development if a board member chose to seek mileage compensation.
And then I guess I would add, and Kevin, you can probably speak to this, if somebody had questions about that, where is that information available? For instance, I have no idea that there's a board service fund, nor have I ever considered asking about money from it. Have we spent any money from the board service fund in the past year?
I mean, at this point, it's been very little, because typically what it would have provided for is potentially any, what Dr. Lorenz is saying, typically for capital conference, things like that. So it's not necessarily, this is what I was always confusing about the board service fund. It's not necessarily a specific fund set aside. It's something that has to be tracked. So it
is something that if I or anybody asked, what did the board spend last year on travel, that we would be able to give an answer.
Correct, yes.
And I'm going out on a limb, but the amount that I can anticipate for this past fiscal year at least is 0.
I mean, I haven't looked at the number, but I would assume that it would, yes, correct.
It's 0 for me, so.
Oh, nobody.
It sounds to me like it might be worth the board putting on a work session at some point, some sort of discussion about compensation and getting all the facts for us and the any information about donating, et cetera. Okay, we'll work on that. Anything else on all of these annual items? Seeing nothing, Mr. Hawley, can we vote on those?
Mr. Doherty?
Yes.
Dr. Lorenz?
Yes.
Ms. Pettit?
Yes.
Dr. Excuse me, Dr. Swetchina?
Yes.
Mrs. Washburn?
Yes.
Motion carried. All right, we move into some discussion topics, and these are organizational in nature, as you can see what they're about. The first item is to discuss organization of board agendas. Before we get into that, I wonder if I could take just a moment. I lost Mr. Dool. Oh, there he is. Okay. I was going to ask the board, this is not a regular meeting. There is not hearing of the public at this meeting. And so the board has received at least one email concerning the change in quarantine, the change in situation as far as the virus is concerned, and school did just start back up yesterday. So I wonder if Mr. Dool could give us a brief report and clarify what the new quarantine rules are, what the plans are as far as going back to school, so that we have it publicly recorded, what is happening in the school buildings starting yesterday and then moving ahead to the beginning of the next semester. He's getting back on his computer there for us.
Okay, so the governor and Ohio Department of Health have changed some of the guidelines with regards to how we conduct contact tracing in schools. At this time, what that means is for positive cases of COVID that exist within classroom settings, school districts are no longer required to complete contact tracing or to place students in quarantine for exposure within those classrooms. This is only applicable to classroom settings. So anything beyond instruction within a classroom would not apply. For example, extracurriculars, athletics, or other settings where we can't follow mitigation efforts that would prevent the spread of COVID. For example, masking being an important one. For instance, in the cafeteria where students are eating lunch, they're not wearing masks, we would still have to conduct contact tracing and complete quarantine for that. With regards to those changes, we still do want to keep parents informed when there are positive cases and to provide them that opportunity to monitor their child for signs or symptoms of possible COVID. So we will continue to reach out and provide them with that information when cases do occur within the classroom setting. We are waiting to get further clarification from Hamilton County Public Health with regards to how this applies to buses, because buses are a setting where we are wearing masks, we are, as appropriate, distancing when we can, cleaning. So we have those mitigation efforts in place, but buses haven't been in and of themselves clarified by Ohio Department of Public Health as to whether or not we would have to do quarantining for cases there. And as we have seen, that's where the primary number of quarantines have occurred in our K-12 setting or in our K-4 setting.
Just to make sure that I understand, and so that the public has it said one more time, the new guidelines for contact tracing apply to the classroom as long as we are masking, as long as we are following the masking protocol.
Correct.
If there's a positive case in a classroom, we do not have to we don't have to require quarantines for other students in that classroom. We are still going to attempt to contact the parents of children in that classroom to let them know that there has been a positive case, but that we will not be quarantining students. And this will apply both now while we have buildings that are on a hybrid schedule and when we go back to a full schedule, because it is not going to be changed by distances that are able to be achieved in a classroom. It just has to do with the masking protocol. Is that correct?
You're correct. When reaching out and asking that question specifically to Hamilton County Public Health about distance, because the data from research has shown that distance within a classroom has not had an impact upon the spread of COVID, distance will no longer be used as a criteria for determining a close contact within a classroom setting. And that's because we are following very stringently the masking, the hand sanitizing, the cleaning or disinfecting. Those activities have shown, or those bundled mitigation efforts have shown to reduce the spread of COVID more so than distance within a classroom setting. Those other settings that we've talked about, mitigation efforts aren't possible to the degree that they are in the classroom. And that's why, for example, in the cafeteria or athletics, we still have to go through quarantine because students' risk of exposure in those settings is much greater. The bus, we're not sure yet. It is a contained, tight space, which might be different than a classroom, and that's what public health still needs to clarify.
Okay, I believe that the email that we got as a board showed just a little bit of confusion because it said as long as you're following the mask and safety guidelines. And so the person, I believe, who wrote to us was not sure that all of the guidelines could be followed once we went back to a 5-day-a-week if the classrooms were closer together. So I believe you've answered the question that we don't have to do quarantine. We're still going to try to do, in a sense, the contact tracing. We're still going to let folks know that there was a positive case in their classroom, but we do not have to quarantine those students.
That is correct. And we should also state, even though the data within the classroom has shown that spread is not contingent as much upon distance because of the masking and other mitigation efforts, it is still the gold standard to try to provide social distancing to the extent that we can. So even in a full capacity model, we still have made a number of changes that have allowed us to keep students separated as much as possible. For example, cohorting groups, not having groups intermingling as much at our primary elementary level, for example, helps us to keep social distance. And within classrooms, keeping desks spaced as much as possible. So those efforts will still continue to reduce the spread, even though within the classroom, because of the masking and other things, that distance isn't as critical.
And I realize that I misspoke. I said something about us forcing students to quarantine. It's not the schools that are forcing students to quarantine. It's the guidelines that have been setting the quarantine guidelines. And the reason I wanted to correct that statement is I just feel like our school buildings, our principals, our teachers, our custodians, our staff, they have all done such a fantastic job of following guidelines and keeping our kids as safe as they can. And I know there have been lots of kids that have been quarantined. I have a grandson who was quarantined 3 times before the end of the calendar year. But he's healthy. And so, you know, they've been doing a great job with our kids. And so we made it through 2020. We've just got to keep going in 2021. Anybody else have any questions for Mr. Dool? I just wanted to make sure we got that statement out for the public who's listening to our meeting.
Yeah, did you asked about the model for second semester? Has the team had an opportunity yet to discuss second semester since it's just around the corner? Initially, the plan was to return to full capacity, right, at second semester?
I think Mrs.
That
Connor's
is-
prepared to
yeah.
answer. Yeah.
Okay.
Make sure you guys can hear me. It is the intention at this time that everybody is full capacity. That means our current 5th through 12th grade who are at half capacity will be turning full capacity at the semester change. So we have this week and 4 student days next week, and then we will be bringing everybody back to full capacity on that date.
Well, I want to applaud the effort that you have all taken in order to follow the guidelines that have been placed for us and to keep the safety of the children paramount. I think that we've shown very much to the data we've achieved in the Loveland School District that many more children were quarantined because of potential exposure than actually got COVID. And in addition, we showed that the rates of children getting COVID was very similar to the rates in the community as a whole, and that the school has not been an area for spread. I think everybody understands that the guidance from the state changed because a multi-system-wide, a complete statewide study over multi-systems was done, showing exactly that many more children being quarantined and never showing signs of illness. So in this case, kind of following data and following science, although it happened more slowly than I personally would have liked, really showed that it's safe for children to be closer than 6 feet, and that a full capacity model should not expose us to a significant increase in COVID over what our background rates have been. So I applaud all the work that you've done.
Anything else? Anything from Ms. Pettit or Mr. Doherty? Seeing some head shaking, we will continue on. I actually think we can combine two items here. We have organization of board agendas and district committee representatives. The organization of board agendas is on the agenda to discuss if we are, if the board is satisfied with the way we have been setting up our agenda, what we have been including in our meetings. And I believe that we were going to discuss briefly whether we are continuing the hearing of the public in the way that we have it in our policy, which I think we have talked about doing, and also including a follow-through list. I know that Mr. Doherty has worked on a couple of things, and so I think the board is working on this notion of a follow-through list and how it appears on our website. Mr. Doherty, are there things you'd like to lead us through this evening, or are we just in a process of looking at those things and we can carry this on to another meeting?
Yeah, I think it needs to be carried forward, but just to assure everybody, the public, and obviously the rest of the board members know this, but we've put together some proposals internally about structure, some restructuring, limited restructuring at this point for the website that is inclusive of trying to bring better transparency to the to-do list, better controls over it, et cetera. So that's just floating around for individual board members to take a look at and get comfortable with before we bring it into a discussion in a meeting like this at some point in the future. And as far as hearing of the public is concerned, I just have a personal opinion on that we shouldn't give up on that at all. But perhaps time it in a way, time future ones in a way that are cognizant of issues that are in front of the board and of maybe particular sensitivity to the community. Maybe as we get into the superintendent hiring process, there'll be an ideal opportunity to have a hearing of the public, to use it as a forum to get that kind of input. Things like that, I think, are worthy of discussion as we go forward. So I, for one, am comfortable with the structure of the agendas, because they do give us the flexibility to do things like that when we think it's appropriate to do so.
Any other discussion or questions about board agendas? The reason I say that it goes into number 2, the discussion on number 2, is we have promised for several months to revisit the notion of district administrative board committees that we have. And you are aware that we have 4 major committee structures that we have been working with in the past. They have been administrative in nature in that they have been led by administrators, and they have had board members who have participated in those meetings in order to help inform the board, have the board be able to ask questions, have the board be able to bring forward notions through those committees. So we have a finance committee, we have a facilities committee, we have a policies committee, and we have a student experience committee. And I believe the question that has come up recently is whether the board would like to continue those as administrative committees, or whether there are any of those committees that the board considers to be board committees. In other words, are they led by board members rather than administrators? And would we like to establish them as board committees, in which case they are subject to the Sunshine Law and would be open to the public and would keep minutes and would keep records of those meetings. If they are administrative committees, they are called by the administrators. They are opportunities for board members to pose questions or pose ideas, but there is no board business conducted at those meetings. In fact, there's very little board business discussed, with the exception of saying this notion needs to be brought to the board and described in public for board action. So we're open to discussion here. However the discussion goes, we should, if we are able, establish those committees, either by volunteering to be part of administrative committees or establishing board committees and putting them into the minutes, probably at our January business meeting. Thoughts?
I can say for the Student Experience Committee that is completely organized and run by the administrators, and I am just there to get updates and to be able to report back to the board that there isn't board business. So I couldn't justify it being a board committee. I think it needs to remain as an administrative committee.
And are you volunteering to be on that committee again?
I would love to.
Mr. Doherty. Mr. Doherty.
Yeah, thank you. I sit on finance and facilities, and a couple of thoughts here. One, we have a board. There may be a reason for us at times to have some significant financial discussions, but I don't know that we need the committee necessarily to do that. We certainly have a lot of financial discussions within the board meeting, and I think anything that arises in this administrative meeting, certainly finds its way to the floor in the board meetings. Facilities is far less active than finance. At this point in time, I have a strong opinion that trying to do that at the board level would not be impactful, would be overhead that we don't need to have. If at some point in the future we do start seeing our way to significant capital investments, facility improvements, or new buildings, or things of that nature, my feelings might change a lot on it. But that's nowhere near what the situation is right now. So I for one am comfortable with the structure of finance and facilities as they stand. I think I bring value to both of them and would volunteer to continue on in that capacity. The policy committee is one that I don't know if that, Kathy, you're far closer to it than anybody. Is there maybe a reason to have that be a board committee, or do you feel that it's better served at the district level?
I can report how I have participated in the policy committee over the years, and it has been called by the superintendent. We have a policy consultant, and that person comes in and consults with the entire administrative team. So there are many policies that have to do with, I don't know, free and reduced lunch, or they have to do with keeping records about something. And so this policy consultant takes care of bringing in any legislative updates, any legal updates that are needed to be brought, and the administrators have a chance to say, this is how we've been doing it. We've already been doing it according to this law, or this is what will change if the law changes. Here are the guidelines that we would need to set up. I don't know that I see that those meetings being useful as open board meetings, because I think that the public would be mostly bored to tears by them. But I also think that everything that is presented in the policy committee comes to the full board fully. The policy is presented in full on the agenda. It has a first reading, it has a second reading. So the public always has a chance to see any policy changes or any new policies. They come to the public through our meeting structure regularly. So I also don't see a reason for that to be a board committee run by a board member. That would be my opinion on that. I haven't heard from Ms. Pettit or Dr. Swetchenow. They're not jumping up and down volunteering to serve on administrative committees. Michelle is, yes.
I'll stay on the ones I'm on, or was on. I got to attend my first policy one. Um, So I agree with what you said. I don't think there's a need to make it a board committee at this point. And the same with the facilities at this point.
And Eric, what do you think?
I think I can't keep up with my calendar and adding all of these meetings. I felt before, and I still feel the same way, that these are meetings that are administrative in nature with board member attendance rather than board meetings. The only one that I had the remotest question of, does actual board work happen, was the policy committee meeting. And your description of it was perfectly acceptable to me. I don't see any reason that that should be a board level committee. So I don't see any reason to change the way that I understood that it worked in the first place.
The only thing audience members would get from the policy committee meetings is just how deep my love of nitpicking and proofreading is. They would just understand something about me that's maybe a little frightening.
Kathy, to that point, Michelle or I could also help the public understand that the majority of the conversation at the last facilities committee meeting was about the replacement over upcoming years of building roofs, things of that nature. Nothing, more. Not that those are small undertakings if you know anything about the area, but it's things that are planned years in advance and are required maintenance, et cetera. So things like that are generally what's discussed in facilities. Not of particular interest. It's maintaining kind of the day-to-day stuff, and I think again on the finance thing, for the most part, all that gets re-aired in board meetings, one place or another. So I guess I'm just trying to reassure the public that there's nothing particularly mysterious going on behind the scenes at these meetings that doesn't find its way or could not find its way if a question was asked at a board meeting.
Michelle.
I think this is the right time to ask this. With the facilities and the policy committee meetings that are coming up next week, those are usually administered by Amy, who will not be here. Are we having those or postponing those?
I don't know for sure the answer to the question. It's a good question. I don't believe that we will have a policy meeting next week. Facilities, I'm not sure about.
If John Ames is
I mean,
here,
I would say in facilities, Mr. Ames typically runs that meeting, so I believe that would still occur. And he's also nodding his head that he said yes. So
Okay, and the policy committee is actually on the 21st.
We do.
There would be a facilities committee meeting next week, but I don't believe there is a policy meeting next week.
There's a finance, I think, on the same day as facilities. Is that still correct, Kevin?
Say that again, Kevin.
I see a finance committee meeting right before the facilities meeting on Tuesday, the 12th. Is that still the case?
yes, that is still the case.
The policy committee is actually the 21st of January.
Let's leave it on your calendar until we figure out if there's anything that's needed. I'll see if I can get to the appropriate administrator that can tell me whether we need that. And what I'm hearing people say is let's get our volunteer memberships together and have those published in our minutes at our regular business meeting in January, so that it is clear to the public which board members are attending which administrative committees, And then what we will do is make every effort at each business meeting to make sure that if there has been an administrative committee meeting that a board member has attended, the board members either report on that committee work or they make a note that that committee work is noted in the business manager's report, is noted in the director of teaching and learning's report, those kinds of things. All right, are we okay then on committees and agendas? Number 3 on these discussion items is simply to note that we do have representatives from the Board of Education to specific Loveland City Council committees, those being the Community Improvement Corporation, Planning and Zoning, Recreation Board, and Tax Incentive Review Committee. And we have determined that none of those terms are up at this point. So none of those need to be acted on. Those are simply listed as who those representatives are. You'll see that one of them is a board member. Michelle reports to the CIC. Kevin Hawley reports to the Tax Incentive Review. And then the board has appointed community members to Planning and Zoning and Recreation Board. I would just ask the board at this point when they would expect reports from those folks. Do you think that there should be quarterly reports in meetings? Do you think that there should be monthly check-ins on those? Do you think that there should just be reports when there is something to report?
I do think that it may be of value to circle back to the members that were selected for those positions to make sure that our understanding is the same as their understanding about what our desire is for updates. And for instance, I can pick the Planning and Zoning Commission representative. I don't know what his charge was, and we haven't heard from him since I've been here. So I think there's some value to making sure we're on the same page. I certainly don't think it has to be on a particular date.
I believe that we had asked for regular reports, and I can't guarantee that we had asked for quarterly reports. I know we have not gotten them. What I believe we have gotten from time to time was a report through the superintendent that she had checked in with Planning and Zoning, that she had checked in with Recreation Rep, and that there was nothing to report to the board. So it has typically been the superintendent duty to check in and make sure that there were reports, but I can circle back with them and make sure that our understanding is correct of that. Okay, there are 2 final things.
Dr. Lorenz, sorry to circle back on one with the district committee representatives.
Yes.
One that is not on here is that we do need to discuss is the board Business Advisory Council.
Oh, thank you. The business, is that your council?
No, so it's actually Mrs. Connors. So I'm not sure if she, well,
That's right. That is right, and we did not appoint a representative this year, and we need to. Is that correct?
Yes, it's been vacant for since Mr. Jarvis.
Thank you. I am sorry, I forgot about that. Thank you for reminding me. That we have had one report from the Business Advisory Council, and there are regular meetings, and there are 4 of those a year. Is that correct?
Yes, there are 4 required, and we are required by law to engage in the Business Advisory Council of some capacity. So
We would need a board representative to the business. And when are those meetings?
So those are typically 1 hour before your board business meeting. So if a meeting starts at 6, we usually hold those at 5. And we've not set those for this particular calendar year because we were waiting to see who the potential new board rep might be. We've held our last few without a board rep available.
I would,
So,
I
I'm
would
sorry.
just note that I don't think that I would volunteer to be on that committee just because of the general meeting. Prior to the meeting, I generally like to get myself ready to roll for the meeting, and I'd probably be sitting there the whole time worrying about getting to the next meeting. Dr. Swetchnow.
I would struggle, personally, I would struggle to get here at 5 and then before a 6 o'clock meeting. I could do it. I don't know who the people are on that board and what the purpose of it is. I heard you say that it was required by law, but I don't know enough about it.
So it is an advisory board that works collaboratively with the district on recommendations for maybe programming, curriculum, experiential learning opportunities for students, really kind of looking at how you can increase the college and career readiness approach, pretty much K-12 throughout your entire district. So it's really, it's an advisory board. Some districts, depending on the depth and the breadth and how long they've had the councils, have turned them into some really robust pieces. We're only in like our second year of the council. So, it is still what I would consider kind of in its infancy. So we, prior to COVID, used the council quite a bit to do things like student resume evaluations. We use them to kind of do some work with some of our students to find us placements for students for experiential learning. So we work with our chambers, we work with several business partners in an advisory capacity.
And you've been holding those quarterly
Yes.
throughout COVID?
Yes. Yeah.
Any other input? Michelle has her hand raised.
Michelle.
I am on the CIC meeting, which I already meet before board meetings a lot. So I don't know that I could fit those in. Because usually the meetings for CIC are right before our board meetings.
Eileen, Kevin, we haven't heard from you.
I'm not saying no. I'm just thinking through my head with driving kids to different practices and such.
It sounds like the kind of thing that ought to be natural for me to do. I'm just concerned about the other commitments I've got to the board. And similar to some of the other comments, the timing right before these board meetings. I know, I'm in prep all day long prior to a board meeting, right up, kind of to the moment. So I'd be concerned. It might ease some issues if, Andrea, there was a way to change the date and time of those meetings. Maybe some of us could see a way to participate if it wasn't so closely aligned with these meetings.
So that is definitely up for discussion. I will say that originally that was the choice of most people from the board member at the time, because it was convenient and it was before the board meeting. So it was like one evening. So I don't believe that anyone else that's on the committee, we've not set those dates yet. So our business partners are just kind of, holding still until we've had this organizational meeting to determine who would be that rep. So that is completely, open. So.
And I assume there's no constraints on that always being a Zoom meeting if everybody agreed to it, right?
Absolutely.
I was going to say, I can do it if we can just make sure we look at the dates ahead of time and make sure that they are workable for everybody, unless you wanted it, Mr. Doherty.
I was going to say, Eileen, depending on the dates, the timing, et cetera, what the time commitments are, if we can rethink those, maybe. I am just concerned about the amount of commitments already. That's all. So this is one that I would like to help on.
I don't think that we will have a motion or a resolution this evening to appoint anyone. I think we would put that on our January business meeting. Perhaps I could suggest that Mrs. Washburn communicate with Mrs. Connor about seeing if she could work out a time to participate in this for the next, there'll be 3 more meetings this year. So see about that. And then we could see about the next person if it's not working well for Mrs. Washburn. How about that? All right, and then in January, we would have a recap of all of these folks, and we would have a resolution to appoint a board representative to the Business Advisory Council, so that would go in the minutes. All right, next item, Board Planning Commission. We have been promising for months to talk about the Planning Commission and where we go. As I understand it, we have 2 folks who were stepping down, is that correct? Yeah. And then we have, I believe, according to our Constitution, and now I've misplaced it, it's here somewhere. I believe that the year starts August 1st. So that we had some folks, I think, who also signed up for the commission or were appointed to the commission whose term would be up on August 1st. So I think the board needs to discuss several things about the Planning Commission, whether the bylaws should stand as they are, whether the membership is sufficient, when we would be able to appoint at least replacements for those who have come off, but do we want to add members to the commission? And perhaps a little bit about the organization and how we're going to have the commission report to the board and get input from the board and those kinds of things. And so I'll kind of leave the discussion to be led by Mrs. Washburn and Dr. Swetchenow. They are the board reps to the Planning Commission.
I'm happy to lead. Eileen, do you have anything that you want to pitch in before I babble?
No, babble away and I'll chime in.
I think that we've talked about this so much because there's been concerns about the initial development of the Planning Commission, which is, unfortunately for me, I don't have a lot of feedback on because I wasn't part of the board at that point in time. I do think that with 2 people stepping down, it gives us an easy access to add 2 people in without too much friction from the Constitution and bylaws standpoint. Also, my understanding is that we have the ability to change the size of that Planning Commission at any point in time. And I know that there's the ability to add at least 4 more people without it becoming unwieldy. At some point, it becomes unwieldy if you start adding people willy-nilly, so to speak. So what we've talked about is trying to identify people to replace the 2 people stepping down, and how do we go about that? And then B, how do we canvass the community to determine if there is additional interest to make interim additions to that board prior to August when people start rolling off of it. The board's done great work. There's 4 separate committees on it. Some of those committees have had more clear guidance from us than others. In particular, beyond the fact that I am greatly appreciative of all of their help, student experience has been a little bit of a challenge this year. How do you improve the student experience when they can't do anything together? So they've worked really hard at trying to come up with ways to do that and ways to help us. I feel comfortable that the way that Eileen and I represent the board at the Planning Commission and that the Planning Commission reports back to us helps us to filter through the important things that will need additional board work to bring to fruition, and how much of it is just information that flows from what they've gathered to us. So I don't have a lot that I think that needs to change from that standpoint. I do have some concerns that they were saddled with being a board-related commission. So the sunshine laws and the minutes and everything that comes with that is a little bit onerous for volunteers from the community to have to follow through on. And I'd like to see some changes as we go forward in that. I just don't know how feasible or possible that is. So I think that's really what I need to say. We have the ability to add 2 people. We need to figure out how to best do that and who would be willing to do that. And then we have a little bit more complicated question of adding and making the board a little bit, or making the planning commission a little bit larger than it is right now. I think that's all I have. Did that sum it up well enough in your mind, Eileen?
Eileen, anything?
No, I think Eric had a lot of babbling and did a good job. We just have to, like you said, fill in those spots and make sure that we are representative and continue to move forward and are very intentional, I guess, with tasks that
And I
we,
think I'd also like to, to note that in the interest of transparency and doing things in the open, the planning commission has been set up in that way, and it's made it hard for them to do work because they can't do things like talk to each other outside of a meeting and figure out what to do. I'm torn because on the one hand, I want it to be easy and frictionless and them to be able to do the work, and on the other hand, the last thing I want is them to be accused of, being underground moles for the board that are only doing what the board says to do.
Well, I would just say that I don't know that I don't have any complaints about the Planning Commission. My only concern is I don't feel, as a board member who has not been a representative on the commission, I don't feel that I have heard as well what the Planning Commission would like us to hear as I could have. Now, that could be my fault, that I'm not paying enough attention, I'm not reading all their minutes, that kind of thing. So, if I had a wish list, I would wish for some sort of regular report that came to us, if it is going to be a board planning commission. The only problems I have with anything that you said, I think we can easily replace the 2 people who have come off. To add to the commission, we would need to change the Constitution, which is certainly doable. It's just a matter of the board having discussion and having a resolution and changing the Constitution and adding more people to the list. There is nothing in the Constitution or the bylaws that speaks to how the board chooses those appointees. The process that we went through to start the commission was a very not complicated, but a very precise process. And so we had an application form online and asked people to fill it out. It came to the 5 board members blinded. So we knew only that people were applicant number 1, number 2, number 3. And we agreed upon a rubric that we looked at those applications, and we were looking for things in the application that told us that the person might be a consensus builder, things in the application that told us that the person was connected to the schools or the community in a way that seemed to make sense to want to work with the board on something. And then I believe part of our rubric was looking for experience or expertise that the person might show that would be a benefit to the district, even if, so that was outside of the connection. Like if the person was a doctor, then we could put them on the commission and they could help us with the coronavirus, that kind of thing. So again, it was a completely blind process. And the only problem I had with the process was there were some applicants who did not give us enough information to allow a full set of numbers on the rubric. If they didn't answer a question or didn't provide certain amounts of information, there was no way to give them a 4 on that part of the rubric because there was no information there to say about it. That was the only problem I had with the application. But it was a very complicated process. And I don't know that I would suggest that we do that all the time. It was time consuming. It did not seem to result in at least the appearance of diversity that we were looking for. So those are my comments on what you said. Certainly we can do any of those things. I would be looking for a little more maybe back and forth between the board and not necessarily at a meeting, but the commission says, we want to research this, and the board says, go ahead and do it. Or they say, what do you want us to research about this? And we say, well, here are some ideas, and then they go.
Yeah, and at our last meeting, didn't we talk about having them come quarterly, or we didn't set a specific time to present on the different
We
agenda?
did, and we kind of put it off to this to kind of make it more, but I agree with you that asking them on a regular basis to present a report would alleviate, the concerns about A, in the community, well, what are they doing? And B, gosh, I'm looking at a lot of other things. Can you help me out with what you're doing and what you need? And let me give you the feedback rather than me guessing what that is. And to some degree, that's probably my fault because I've gotten that feedback and I've talked to them and they've kind of moving on doing what they need to do. And some committees have had more structured asks and tasks than others and have identified those for the most part themselves. Because again, one of the other things that we strove for is the ability for them to be independent of the board.
Yes. It can be strived or strove. I prefer, it's not striven, but I did want to speak to one other thing. You said the complication or the requirements that are on them because they are a board commission. They were established as a board commission because the board was looking for ways to get information from the community, ways to engage the community with the board. And so they were to be a board commission. There are districts, I believe, that have had superintendent commissions where the superintendent is the person that sends these people out to do research and discuss things and get community input and then reports to the board. And again, that's different than a board commission. And so I think the only way to get it to not have all those sunshine law requirements is for it not to be a board commission, but it was established as a board commission for the very reason that the board wanted to find ways to connect with the community. So we just have to work on it to make sure it works, I guess.
Well, and I think your point is a great one. I don't think there's a reason to change that in the structure and the time that we have now. At some point in the future, there might be, especially if the nature of those requirements keeps people from participating.
Yeah, I think Kevin Doherty wants to chime in here, and I haven't been looking at him enough. So go ahead, Kevin.
Just a couple of things. Again, always sensitive to people hearing this discussion and maybe wanting to add perspective to what's being said. Anybody that's been in the private sector versus us being a government sector kind of operation is going to be a little appalled by how difficult it is to do things here. In the private sector, there's nothing stopping you from having an impromptu meeting in the middle of the hallway, with N number of people talking about an issue, solving it, moving forward, and it's done. So when we say things like the burden of sunshine, it's, sunshine is there for very good reasons, but it creates a tremendous amount of overhead for people actually doing work and getting things done kind of expeditiously, because you have to go through so much organization and information documenting and sharing and all those kinds of things. Second, in the interest of this idea of continuously improving ourselves in everything that we do, it seems to me that on the developmental list for the Planning Commission is community buy-in, credibility, et cetera. I'm not saying for the whole community, but for part of the community, there continues to be angst about whether it really is representative of the community at large and all that kind of thing. So I think there's an issue there. And before we fill whatever vacancies we have to fill, I think we should open up our ears wide for feedback. um, ask people to take the time right now before any decisions are made to give us their viewpoints on what we should do now. Clearly, we have an opportunity to fill 2 slots. What would the community think about the way we fill those 2 slots before, we as a board go about the process of doing so? And the third piece of input is this idea. It's been talked about several different ways here, but I think one of the ways to create better visibility of the commission and maybe more active involvement with the board, because if I'm thinking clearly, they are the only quote unquote kind of committee that the board has right now. And maybe it does make sense to have a representative of the Planning Commission come to our working session each month and give us a rundown of what's going on, and B, listen to what's going on inside of the board, so there's better alignment and better communication back and forth. I'm done.
I appreciate all of those points, and you're absolutely right.
Michelle, any comments?
I do.
Well, we're not looking for any resolutions this evening. Oh, Michelle, go ahead.
I was going to say that perhaps when the interim superintendent comes, they may have had some experience working with this board, not our board, with the advisory board, and they might be able to offer us some suggestions moving forward with it to get more production out of it.
I would ask all of us to decide, is the Planning Commission being harmed if we don't appoint 2 new members at our January business meeting? Do you think, Dr. Schweitzer?
I think it's hard to say it's harmful to drop people off. I think it's helpful to have the opportunity to add new people in. I think we've talked about it for a really long time.
I agree.
I don't know that I
agree.
necessarily want to continue to push that off.
I was just thinking in the light of what Mr. Doherty said about how to decide who those 2 people might be. I think the board has 2 ways to go. We could either say that our plan is to have 2 new representatives to be able to appoint at our January business meeting. And so we have to figure out where to get those 2 people, or we have to ask for community input, perhaps via email, perhaps via public hearing at the January business meeting, and then make an appointment. We could say at this meeting, and we could send out a message through our website that we are looking to appoint 2 people and see who we hear. Does the Planning Commission have anyone that they know of who has indicated interest?
So I think that the answer to your question somewhat mixes that. I think it's important to try to replace those 2 people as quickly as possible in the interest of moving forward there. But I think that in the interest of adding additional people, that going through a process like Kevin and you just suggested of, let's try to get this a little bit broader in our community. Let's figure out how we're going to ask that and how we're going to do that is probably the best thing to tackle at the next meeting. So I would make that a 2-part answer. There's a 2 and a 4, so to speak.
Okay.
And my personal opinion for the replacement would be replacements, to look at the original applications potentially and select 2 candidates from that pool.
To me, that sounds like a great idea, because those people have already expressed interest, and we can circle back to them and kind of relook at, maybe you scored poorly in the rubric because you didn't answer all of these. Let's have a conversation and try to figure out if that works.
And I'm happy to take charge of that if you guys are okay with it.
You're the best.
I think that sounds great. Does that sound great to the rest of you, that Eileen would take care of sort of beginning the process of 2 new folks that we might be able to appoint at our next meeting, and then also figure out a way to get input on the size of the commission, the way that the board finds appointees for those new places and for all that turnover that's going to need to be done by August 1st. Does that sound all right to others? Kevin?
Yeah, I think it generally sounds okay, but the advisory I'd put on top of it is to, again, learn from our experience here. And the one concern that I have is what I talked about, community acceptance, et cetera, of this. The process that we went through yielded in part this issue. So in looking through the prior applicant pool, I'd be careful about applying the same decision criteria to recommending somebody. I'd think about what we've heard in addition to what we did. If that
Right,
makes
which I think is why Eric said have some back and forth with some of the candidates who maybe had some gaps on their applications, have
Right.
those discussions.
right. If that solves the problem, yeah. I'm not sure what the problem was, so but back and forth, I think, is mandatory, and it may be that there's somebody in there that you need to convince to do it at this stage of the game, because that they fill a gap in the kind of in the makeup of the commission that would be good to change a little bit, evolve.
Eileen, do you still have all of the information?
Unsure.
I
I
know
will
that
have to let you know.
I have all of the paperwork. I do not have anything unblinded. I have all of the applicants. I have the rubric. I have the numbers that came out of it. So I have each individual application. So I can get that to you. It
Okay.
is not unblinded though, so I don't know who is who.
Okay, that's fine.
And I believe that was kept, Julie probably has that. I believe that it came through the superintendent's administrative assistant.
Yep.
Okay.
Sounds good. And I'll look and see if I have it still.
All right. Anything else on the Planning Commission? The final discussion item is board commitments, and you have attached to your agenda the 2020, this is hard to say, the 2020-2021 commitments. And so those are the ones that are in place now. Ms. Connor, do we have new commitments proposed yet, or was our plan this evening to look at these and discuss what was coming out of those?
Yeah, so when we reviewed the work, the board's next charge for the next 6 months in December, we shared the current commitments with you and said that it would be our intention to revise those, but we wanted to first, and we turned it over to the board, and I believe that's when there was a discussion about seeking community input for those.
Okay.
And so I think we're at the point where those are resting in board docs. We have those. So I believe there was a discussion about moving forward with what that would look like in terms of seeking community input and then getting that back to the administrative team so we can start working on refining whatever the board goals, wherever they tend to land.
Thank you. Okay. I don't know, I haven't heard thoughts from the board. The first thought that I would have is, now that we have these, we actually mentioned them in the December meeting, but now we have them on this meeting's board docs agenda. I wonder what the board thinks about asking for a specific hearing of the public section of our January meeting, asking for response to those, asking for anyone who wishes to attend our meeting for the hearing of the public to speak to those. Or do you have other ideas about how we get that community input on those commitments?
I think that's a good idea, but I would also like to come up with a creative way to post it online to receive some electronic input prior to that for people who don't necessarily want to come in person and.
You mean by posting it online? I mean, it's on the website.
Yeah, but a place for people to submit
Okay,
some sort of input.
Yeah,
other
you,
than just responding to the board.
Yeah,
yeah, you,
I
like
don't.
a Google form, I don't know.
I see Mr. Doherty nodding his head. Maybe he has a suggestion.
well, the suggestion and a comment, but the suggestion is the mailing list that we use for Tiger Talk would certainly be an obvious one where we, push it out to what's primarily the parent group. Um, They're going to have very valuable input on this. The comment is that this once again exposes a data insufficiency that we have in that we don't have a good mechanism to get out to members of the public, to every member of the community per se. We've got mailing lists, courtesy of the voter rolls. Doing that on things like this is slow and it can be a little costly, right? I think the last time we looked at this, it could be 5 to 10 grand per mailing. What we really need to have is an email database for as many members of the community as we possibly can. So we could take something like this and blast it out to everybody, not relying on them by chance visiting the website or what have you. But I can think of that being an issue when we get to the superintendent process as well. So I may recommend, not tonight, obviously, but maybe at the next meeting, that we look for an opportunity to have kind of a multi-purpose reach out by snail mail to the community that has the dual interest of answering some question that needs some input on, but also first attempt at proactively collecting email addresses for members of the community. But for this, given the time issues associated with it, I do think that we can email it to the parent database that the district has. We can make it more visible on the website. I definitely think that we should reserve hearing of the public time at an appropriate meeting coming up. We can reach out to the social media sites and ask them, provide them this, and ask them for input, either in the public setting or by email back to us, whatever. So a multi-pronged kind of approach, because based on our discussion in December, this is the starting point for all of the district's expectations, and we should really have it solid and give it a lot of thought.
And Kevin, I would add just one more thing to your list of outreach, which was good, is the other media outlets that we have in the Loveland area are probably the best way to reach non-school people that in conjunction with the social media outlets that we know of,
Yeah.
Non-school people. And it'd probably be good to figure out how to get that out. I'm just envisioning here's our plan. Does anybody have any feedback on this?
I would be willing to speak with our communications consultant that we have and ask that we get something, perhaps this is what goes out, but it has a little blurb with it, that is asking for input. I know that there are contacts right away with the media, if we're calling it, as opposed to social media, the Loveland Magazine, the Loveland Beacon. I think those are our two main ones, but then Andrew would also be able to help us get it out in the parent publication, the parent world. And I think we can get a message on the website that says, here you go, but you're right, the general public does not visit our website regularly. They should every day, they should visit our website, but they don't. So, no, I understand that. And we can, put a call at anyone who has social media contacts that wants to get that to them. We can get those out there too. All right. I think those are all the discussion items for this evening.
Can I just add one thing?
Yes.
Just to make sure that everybody's clear when we were talking about the um, the plan change at the semester to return to full capacity, that the virtual option will be available through the end of the school year. Just wanted to make sure that that was clear to everyone.
Okay, super, thank you. Okay, the next item on the agenda is actually asking for an executive session. I know that our board is quite anxious to begin the process of engaging an interim superintendent. And to that end, I believe the executive session was included on this meeting agenda, but it is my thought that perhaps we have not had enough time since the accepting of the resignation of Dr. Kraus to have some direction from the board. There are some organizations, some people who have names of folks who are interested in serving as interim superintendents. And so I wonder if the board would be willing to consider a special meeting for the purpose. It would be just executive session for the employment of personnel. And it would be in the near future. I think we need to get right on this. And if the board would be willing to consider, obviously there would be executive session to discuss the employment of an interim superintendent, but also might need executive session time for conversations with possible interested parties. And so again, this idea of a special meeting would be set up with an executive session for the employment of personnel. I would ask board members if they have a couple of minutes to discuss their availability for meetings. And I'm assuming we're talking evenings. I'm assuming we don't have any daytime availability. Mrs. Washburn, I know, has a busy day every day with her students. Dr. Swetchenau has a busy day every day with his patients. And so I think we're talking evenings. We do have some requirements, of course, as well. Mr. Hawley needs a 24-hour notice for anyone who gets notice of our meetings. And then the official legal ramifications are that we need 48 hours before we have a meeting unless all board members agree to forego the 48 hours. I would say that a 24-hour turnaround probably wouldn't allow us to get in touch with anyone that we wanted to have a conversation with about being an interim superintendent. So I don't think we're talking tomorrow. I think that, I guess possibly Thursday, although I do have a Great Oaks meeting in the middle there somewhere. I'm thinking possibly we're thinking of Monday evening or Tuesday evening of next week. What does Monday evening, January 11th look like? I see a thumbs up from Mr. Doherty. I see Ms. Pettit giving me a look like Monday evening may not be great for her. I haven't heard from, as my mother used to say, another country heard from. That was her saying.
Kathy, I'd
I
also be.
have plans Monday, the 11th. I'm just looking at what time that is. I think 7:30 I have plans on Monday, the 11th.
Okay,
So I'm available from 5:30 to 7:30. Or 5:30 to 7:15.
Kevin, would you be available 5:30 to 7:30
I can do
on
5
Monday?
too, if we-
Michelle, you're not available?
I can, maybe.
I would be available virtually,
I think
but I will be,
it would be all virtual.
okay,
think it
because
would
I
not
will
we would not.
be transporting two
Someone's waving
children
at
to
me. Hold on
different
1 second.
areas.
For your information, Monday night is the national championship football game, so we might have something.
Just for the audience who's listening to us, there is a national football championship on Monday night. I would just have to say that since the University of Cincinnati is not involved in that, It is not on my radar, but that's a whole other bias that I have. What about Tuesday night?
Tuesday
I can do
works.
Tuesday.
Michelle, Tuesday?
And Kathy, I don't know how urgent the timing issues are on this, but I don't know if it'll be popular either, but I'm willing to do it over the weekend if that would work.
Well, I didn't even ask about the weekend. Thoughts? I would assume that Monday, 5:30 to 7:30, I'm betting the National Football Championship isn't until 8 o'clock? 9, so, we'd be okay with that. So I just need thoughts from everybody. Monday night, Tuesday night, Saturday morning? I hesitate to take a Sunday away from anybody. Michelle?
You said Monday is virtual, it will be virtual.
It will be virtual, yes.
I can make Monday work.
So are we at Monday, 5:30 to 7:30?
Is that okay with everybody?
I was going to say I can do Tuesday or Saturday.
I hear
I can-
somebody bidding
oh.
on Tuesday or Saturday.
I can do Tuesday as well, and Tuesday gives me a little bit more flexibility, but I'm good on Monday.
Monday or
Tuesday's
Tuesday.
better for Eileen and I, Tuesday the 12th. Does
Is-
that work okay for Kevin and Michelle?
Yeah, are you saying that Tuesday gives us more time versus Monday?
Mhm.
I'm okay on Tuesday.
Okay. Okay, well then, how about Tuesday, January 12th? Start time,
5:30 or later works for me.
Tuesday, the 12th at 6? Okay. And it will be all virtual, so we don't have to get anything set up here. Okay, well then, what I would ask at this point is if we would have a motion to amend the agenda to remove the executive session from tonight's agenda. And I'll make that motion.
I'll second.
Somebody's got to do this.
Okay,
Where's
any
my
discussion on
secretary?
that? All right, can we vote on that, Mr. Hawley?
Dr. Lorenz,
Yes.
Ms. Pettit,
Yes.
Dr. Swetchenow,
Yes.
Mrs. Washburn,
Yes.
Mr. Doherty.
Yes.
Okay, I'll just ask before we move for an adjournment, is there anything else that is of an organizational nature, an annual nature, a Happy New Year nature, before we adjourn the meeting? Anything that needs to be added? Eileen's getting ready to gavel the meeting closed.
Oh. That's good.
Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Dr. Swetchenow moved, and I'll second to adjourn.
We
Meeting is
didn't-
adjourned at 8:09.
Do we have to
Thank
vote?
you all very much.